Hey everybody, quick-ish video with some nerdy stuff. How to get some useful physics data for your simulator, for example, from a random YouTube video. So here we have Engine Masters. I found this an enjoyable series. They tweak engines, put them on the dyno, talk about the results. And this is an interesting video. So they have basically the same engine, but they do a couple of tests with a heavy flywheel and heavy rotating parts, and then they take all the heavy parts off and replace them with as lightweight as possible, and they run the tests again. So we see the effect that a lighter rotating mass gives you a bit more power. But what makes it interesting, they do this on the dyno where they control how fast the revs rise, and they do it at 300 RPMs per second and then at 600 RPMs per second. The idea being that the faster you ask your engine to accelerate, the more you will feel the extra heavy rotating masses. So if you do a run at 300 RPM per second acceleration and 600 RPM for both the lightweight parts and the heavy parts, we can now do something interesting. We can approximate with errors and all that sort of stuff, the rotational inertia of the engine. And this is interesting because this is not a number you typically get from a manufacturer. So when your favorite sim marketing department tells you they used all the real data, it always means probably some of it, but you do not get a lot of the data. I've said it so many times on this channel. And what sets a good development team apart from a not as good development team is how to fill in those blanks, because there are many blanks that the LMU guys, that the iRacing guys, that the Evo guys need to fill in because they simply do not get all the data. This is a bit rare, so let's see if we can derive the inertia of the engine from this. So here are the results for the heavy engine, and you can see that when the dyno goes faster, we ask the engine to rev faster. The penalty for the increased weight is 8.5 foot-pounds of torque and 12 horsepower. And then later in the video, they do the same test, 300 RPM per second acceleration and 600 RPM per second acceleration, but then with the lightweight parts. Once they've done that, you get some results here with the increase in torque and power from the lighter parts. So what if we put these numbers in a spreadsheet, there he is, and see if we can get some numbers out of it. So first we write down the torque values they got in pound-feet here, and this is the important part about these calculations. If you're on the correct side of the pond, you do things in SI units and it makes calculations easier. So we have to convert the hamburgers per minute space shuttle squared over national depth. I think that's the unit. Convert that to Newton meters, and we get a difference here. When we rev the engine faster, we expect less torque, and we get less torque if we rev it faster. But the heavy engine loses more torque when we rev it up faster than the light engine. Then we do the same for power, which is in horsepower, which is not really a proper SI unit, but it's like watts, but we'll forgive it because we use that too. So we lose 12 horsepower with the heavy parts, and we only lose 5 horsepower with the lightweight parts if we accelerate the engine faster. All right, we have to convert this to a torque now because this horsepower stuff is a bit confusing. In order to find the torque that this horsepower represents, we need to know the RPM, and there is a 100 RPM difference in their data between the 300 and 600 RPM acceleration runs, but I'm sitting in the middle, it's pretty close. So you can calculate this power back to a torque at this RPM with a little constant to get, because you know a horsepower is not a proper unit, but with a conversion factor we get 30 Newton meters on the heavy engine and 5 Newton meters lost on the light engine. So again, this is what you lose when you go from a slow acceleration run to a fast acceleration run, and the fast acceleration run loses 13 Newton meters on the heavy engine and only loses 5 Newton meters on the light engine. Now, well, we are cutting corners just ever so slightly, but you can see the torque value of 12 and 6, and here we have 13 and 5, so it's fairly constant. Let's just take the average torque that we got from calculating the torque at the peak power level and also at the peak torque. We get 12 Newton meters and 5 Newton meters-ish for the heavy and light engine. If we accelerate the heavy bits engine slowly and then fast, the fast rotating engine has to spin its own parts up, and we lose on average 12 Newton meters. Equipped with lightweight parts, We still lose power if we rev up the engine faster because some power goes into revving up itself, but then it's 5 Newton meters. So we have a torque that is lost purely from that 300 RPM per second acceleration difference that we had. Then we convert this 300 RPM per second to the proper unit, radians per second, so it's acceleration, rotational acceleration. You get 31.4 radians per second. And then the equation is really simple. What is the rotational inertia of a thing that accelerates at 31.4 radians per second when subjected to a torque of 12.3 Newton meters? And for that you simply divide the torque by the acceleration, and then you get the inertia. And I snuck a little squared in there because I forgot that. So the total estimated rotational inertia of this engine is almost 0.4 kilogram meters squared, which is quite a lot. And this is without the torque converter or clutch. It's quite a large number, so big V8 of course. You can also see we about half that inertia going to the light parts. But it's very rare to get an idea of rotational inertia of an engine. And race engines, of course, they tend to be of the lighter variety. So maybe this 0.17 isn't too bad for a lightweight V8 type engine. But it's important to see that if you make a road car, they rev a lot less quickly, probably to a large degree because the rotational inertia is larger. So maybe that was interesting, you know, you get this interesting video. Can you get some useful data out of it that is normally not really available a lot of the time, and sim people have to sort of do an educated guess? Well, this is still an approximation, but this, I would say, puts some education in the guess. So maybe that was interesting. Thanks for watching. Catch you later. Bye.